Welcome to the Quantum AI Coach podcast. I'm Gina, founder of Virtual World Coaching Academy.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're actually stripping away the usual corporate pleasantries today because the material sitting in front of us requires a fairly confronting look at how we operate.
Yeah, it really does.
We're looking at a stack of advanced strategic frameworks, energetic diagnostics, and some pretty intense leadership case studies. Our mission today is to bridge the gap between neuroscience and what these sources call quantum sovereignty.
Right, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's actually incredibly practical.
Very practical. Specifically, we're going to explore the architecture of the elegant exit. And right out of the gate, we're dismantling one of the most pervasive sort of sacred myths in modern business.
The open door policy.
Exactly, the open door policy. You are probably familiar with it. You tell yourself that being infinitely accessible makes you a supportive leader. But our sources argue the exact opposite. They suggest that infinite accessibility is, well, it's a dangerous capacity leak.
Because that open door is actually a structural collapse disguised as a virtue. And to really unpack the depth of this, we're going to look through two distinct lenses today. You'll take the perspective of the architect, examining the structural flaws, the systems, and the physical capacity leaks in our daily operations.
Right.
And I'll be operating as the sovereign, looking at the internal identity, the frequency you're emitting, and, the energy dynamics behind these behaviors. Because structural systems in a business only fail when the internal architecture of the leader collapses first.
I want to start right at that structural flaw. The materials use this fascinating metaphor, describing your cognitive bandwidth as a throne room.
Oh, I love this metaphor.
It's so good.
Yeah.
If we look at this historically, a throne room was the ultimate center of strategic command.
Yeah.
You could not just wander in because you had a minor grievance or like a quick question.
Right, there were guards.
There were protocols, there were filters designed to protect the sovereign's attention. Yet when we look at modern executive leadership, it's a complete free-for-all.
Yeah, total free-for-all.
If clients or contractors or team members can walk right into the throne room of your mind without a protocol via a Slack ping, a text, or a quote-unquote quick calendar invite, you're not holding a safe container for your team. You're holding a sieve. You're actively being consumed.
But, the transition from a container to a sieve doesn't just happen overnight. It happens through a very specific psychological driver that the diagnostics refer to as a compliance leak.
Okay, unpack that.
Let's break down why an intelligent leader allows their throne room to be treated like a public lobby. Internally, they are operating from a have-to frequency.
I have to frequency.
Exactly. There's a subconscious, deeply ingrained belief that you must be perpetually available to prove your value, to justify your compensation, or validate your position as the leader. You're basically compensating for imposter syndrome with availability.
Wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense from a psychological standpoint.
Yeah.
We substitute actual visionary output with the mere appearance of being busy and needed.
Yes, exactly.
But the sources also use a term here that sounds a bit esoteric, the heavy field of energy. As the architect, I need to ground that. What does a heavy field actually look like on a Tuesday morning in a corporate office?
Well, let's ground it entirely in behavioral neuroscience. When you operate from that have-to frequency, you slip into the rescuer dynamic.
The rescuer.
Right. You assume the emotional and operational responsibility for everyone's immediate momentary anxiety. In a physical office or even a Zoom room, human beings possess mirror neurons.
Right, they read our microexpression.
They subconsciously read and match your nervous system state. So a heavy field is a state of palpable, low-grade chronic stress. When you rush in to save the day, your nervous system is agitated.
And then your team mirrors that agitation.
Exactly. They sense the anxiety, which shuts down their own prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for problem solving. So by playing the rescuer, your biological state is actively preventing your team from developing their own cognitive maturity.
So you're chemically enabling their dependency.
You really are.
That is a brilliant translation.
Yeah.
So the heavy field isn't some mystical aura. It's a measurable state of nervous system co-regulation.
Yes.
And the cost of that co-regulation is staggering. When you're acting as the sieve, your visionary energy drains out. And it creates a phenomenon the frameworks call access debt.
Access debt.
I look at this a lot like technical debt in software engineering. When you write sloppy code just to get a product out the door quickly, you eventually have to spend months fixing the bugs.
Right.
Access debt is operational debt. Because you granted unfiltered access, you get trapped in endless loops of mundane how-to questions. You're paying for your open door with your highest cognitive hours.
And much like financial or technical debt, access debt compounds. You spend your day putting out tiny fires, which means your visionary expansion work gets pushed to nights and weekends.
Oh, absolutely.
Your nervous system becomes hijacked by anticipation. You're constantly on edge, waiting for the next interruption. You've allowed your internal boundaries to become so permeable that they generate external chaos.
Okay, I have to pause and challenge this because I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now.
Okay, what is it?
It's the exact objection I had when I reviewed the case studies. The fundamental job of a leader is to support the team.
Well,
If we shut the door, if we put up walls and refuse to answer questions, aren't we just being obstinate? Aren't we abandoning the people who rely on us to keep the business moving?
see, that guilt you're describing is the ghost of the compliance leak. When you feel that urge to jump in, the question you're asking yourself is, how can I help my team more right now?
Right.
The sovereign perspective requires a complete values-based reframe. The question is not about momentary help, it's what are my core values here?
Okay, so shifting the focus.
Yeah. If your value is building a resilient, capable organization, then swooping in to solve a minor problem is actually a violation of that value.
Wow, okay.
If you constantly emit a frequency of infinite availability, you act as a magnet for unaware dependent behavior. You are broadcasting an unspoken invitation. Bring me your unfinished thoughts and your unattempted problems.
So it requires a complete identity shift. The frameworks call this moving from the chief firesaver, the corporate medic who runs around with a defibrillator for every minor paper cut,
Love that image.
to the sovereign architect, who holds what they call a $1 million identity. But making that shift from medic to architect feels incredibly risky when things are actively going wrong in the business.
Which brings us to a fascinating case study in our sources. It perfectly illustrates how to hold that sovereign identity amidst absolute external chaos. We need to look at the story of the train to London.
Oh, right, the photo shoot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the subject of this case study had committed to a highly visible London photo shoot. This wasn't just a marketing task. It represented a major step into a new tier of visibility and authority. It was a true $1 million identity moment.
Right. But the night before this massive leap, they experience a vivid dream where every single train to London is canceled. The transit app in the dream just goes completely black.
Yeah.
Now, my immediate architect brain wants to dismiss this as just subconscious anxiety. Are the sources suggesting this was some sort of premonition?
Not at all. We don't need to view it as mystical. Neuroscience tells us that the subconscious mind is hyper-efficient at threat detection.
Right, it wants to keep us safe.
Exactly. As this leader was about to step into a much larger, more visible identity, their old nervous system programming panicked. The chief firesaver identity thrives on the familiar chaos of staying small and being needed in the weeds.
So the dream?
The dream of the canceled trains was the brain's attempt to fabricate an excuse to shrink. A subtle fear disguised as a logistical safety net. The old self would have woken up and said, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I shouldn't go today. The team probably needs me here anyway.
They would have used the subconscious fears as external permission to retreat.
Precisely the opposite of sovereignty. But because this leader was actively practicing the elegant exit, they didn't take the bait. The question wasn't about analyzing the dream. The question became, where is my yes coming from?
Oh, that's powerful.
Was the decision to go to London coming from an old obligation? Was it a need to prove their worth? Or was it coming from an unshakable internal power? They realized their commitment was anchored in power, not compulsion. So they bypassed the panic, got dressed, and went to the station. They remained entirely self-led.
And here is where the narrative takes a wild turn.
Yeah, you can't make this up.
They get to the station, having completely mastered their internal emotional state, and the physical reality throws a massive curveball. The actual trains to London were canceled.
Literally canceled.
A broken rail had completely shut down the line. Nothing was moving.
And that moment on the platform is the crux of the entire concept of quantum sovereignty. When they looked at the departure board and saw the canceled trains, they didn't collapse. They didn't feel defeated or take it as a sign of failure.
Why not?
Because the victory had already been secured internally before they even left the house. Sovereignty means moving toward your own expansion without abandoning yourself, regardless of external validation or logistical collapse.
The external circumstance didn't dictate their internal frequency.
Exactly.
The physical train didn't matter because the internal identity shift was permanent. I want to connect this directly back to the listener's calendar. When you no longer abandon yourself, when reality goes off script like a broken rail, you stop abandoning yourself when your marketing director brings you a minor crisis.
Yes.
You don't immediately drop your visionary work to play the medic. You hold your ground.
That is the translation from internal state to external boundary. You maintain your sovereign posture.
So let's operationalize this. How do we take this internal posture and build it into the actual architecture of a business?
The sources introduce a concept that I find absolutely brilliant: high-frequency friction.
Oh, this is where it gets really good. In traditional business operations, we are obsessed with removing friction, right? We want seamless integrations, frictionless communication, flat hierarchies. But the architect in me sees the genius in doing the exact opposite here. You are deliberately installing speed bumps between you and your team.
You're intentionally slowing down access to force cognitive engagement. The sovereign reframe that anchors this concept is perhaps the most powerful statement in the entire stack of research. It states, "My leadership is defined by the depth of my presence, not the speed of my response."
Wow.
Your direct, unmediated energy is a sacred resource. It is not meant to be a reactionary reflex.
Let that sink in for a second. The depth of my presence, not the speed of my response. That single sentence completely shatters the modern Slack culture mindset, where the employee who replies in 30 seconds is considered the most dedicated.
Right, it's so toxic.
So how do we install this friction? Instead of giving us a sterile checklist, let's play this out in a real-world scenario based on the protocols and the sources.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say it's a Tuesday morning. I am deep into a 2-hour visionary block, mapping out a Q3 expansion. My operations manager keeps pinging me about a vendor contract that needs approval. How do I apply these protocols without just ghosting my team?
Well, the first phase is auditing the structural gap. You have to ask yourself why the operations manager is interrupting you in the first place. Are they relying on you because they lack the actual empowerment or financial authority to approve that vendor themselves? Have you inadvertently hoarded the decision-making power, effectively forcing them to come to the throne room for every minor decree?
In most cases, yes. We withhold the authority to stroke our own egos, and then we complain about the dependency we created.
Exactly. Once you recognize that, you move to the second phase, designing the gateway. You replace the open door with a curated intake system.
Like a decision matrix.
Yeah, you might implement a decision-making matrix where anything under a $10,000 impact is handled entirely by the operations team. Or you establish designated office hours. The vendor contract doesn't get a Slack ping. It gets submitted to a Thursday afternoon review queue.
And the final phase is communicating that boundary, which is where most leaders fail. They storm into a meeting exhausted and declare, "Stop bothering me, I need to focus."
Right, which just creates more chaos.
The sources are very clear that this is an elegant exit. You use role-specific, emotionally neutral communication. You say, moving forward, all vendor approvals will be processed on Thursdays at 2 p.m. This ensures I can give them my full strategic attention while protecting our deep work blocks.
Perfect.
You keep it entirely focused on the structural architecture, not your personal frustration.
And to help facilitate this transition, the materials provide several deep coaching prompts. These aren't just like journaling exercises. They're diagnostic tools to spot the leaks.
What's the first one?
One prompt asks you to map your natural life business flow by auditing your energy. It forces you to look at your calendar and identify which specific interactions leave you feeling depleted versus expansive.
Because if you don't aggressively map your own biological flow state, your schedule will simply become a dumping ground for other people's urgencies.
Exactly.
Another prompt that really caught my attention challenges the leader to design systems for surrender. It asks, what manual effort are you currently clinging to out of a lack of trust?
Ouch.
That is a direct hit on the chief Firesaver. If a process in your business requires your constant manual intervention to avoid collapse, it isn't a system, it's a trap. The goal is to replace your exhausting manual effort with scalable trust in your team and your architecture.
And that leads directly to the ultimate question of the visionary lifestyle. The sources push you to define how the business is actually supposed to serve your ideal life. What structural boundaries do you need to feel genuinely free? The sovereign architect doesn't build walls to punish the team or isolate themselves. They build structures that act as a protective shell around their visionary capacity.
The boundary is the container. If you refuse to build it, you remain the sieve.
Which brings us to the most profound, overarching insight in this entire exploration. The sources refer to it as the frequency anchor.
The frequency anchor.
We need to stop viewing boundaries merely as time management tools. We have to understand that our boundaries and the feelings that drive them are how we communicate with the broader environment.
Like the actual unified field.
Yes. The sources use the phrase unified field of consciousness, which we can understand as the interconnected web of human behavior, market dynamics, and relational systems. When you install high-frequency friction and execute an elegant exit, that boundary sends a distinct signal into the system.
You're signaling that your attention is finite and valuable.
You're no longer broadcasting the desperate, anxious energy of the have-to frequency. You are operating from a place of radical choice.
And the research notes a fascinating secondary effect, doesn't it?
It does. When you stop acting like a sieve, you naturally begin to attract a different caliber of people. You become a magnet for high-level clients and autonomous team members who respect depth, who value real authority, and who are, frankly, repelled by micromanagement.
The environment actually reorganizes itself around your new standard.
Yes. So whenever you feel the old familiar guilt creeping in, whenever you feel the urge to grab the defibrillator and play the medic, you must remember that the entire system is listening to and adapting to the frequency of your boundaries.
That is an incredibly liberating perspective. The system adapts to the standard you enforce. I want to leave you with a final thought to really mull over today, an idea that bridges the gap between your daily schedule and your long-term legacy.
This is the big word.
The sources make a highly provocative claim. Your capacity for wealth is limited only by your architecture's capacity to hold it.
Let that sit for a moment.
If your financial and visionary wealth is literally bottlenecked by the systems you tolerate and the boundaries you refuse to set when obsolete, chief Firesaver structures are secretly capping your wealth right this second.
Such a vital question.
Where are you leaking vital capacity simply because you're too afraid to finally close the door?
That is the single most important diagnostic question a leader can sit with.
Now, we know that stepping out of the rescuer dynamic and assuming the sovereign architect role carries a really heavy emotional burden at first. The guilt of letting go of the medic identity is incredibly hard to shake.
Oh, absolutely.
To help with this specific transition, we recommend utilizing the Burden to Boundary Coach. It's a coherence AI-assisted assessment explicitly designed to help you identify exactly where your capacity is leaking and to guide you in installing that high-frequency friction. The link is in the description below.
It's an exceptional tool for bridging the gap between theoretical neuroscience and actionable business architecture.
If you found this exploration useful, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to receive the next episode. Your sovereignty depends on the containers you build.
So when Gina offered me the opportunity to do this, I jumped for it because I think anything that you can do that is going to chip away at these limiting the beliefs of things that hold you back is really, really worth doing. So it's been a really lovely experience, and if anybody's a bit worried about it, just do it, because the opportunity to connect through havening is really, really powerful. It's really, really powerful.
But really helpful, I think, in terms of having that kind of guided process just to kind of let the ideas and the feelings and the images flow, and then try and work out what it actually means afterwards, and to come up with, and it made intuitive sense. It's really, really helpful to then kind of have that debrief of, okay, what can we actually do with this stuff? Because that's where we tend to get stuck, is kind of like coming out of it going, oh, this is all some really interesting ideas and thoughts and feelings and images. But yeah, then, you know, how can we actually harness them to do something different? And I think that's been really, really helpful in terms of clarifying really what I need to prioritize to go forward in a way that will deal with some of that stuff that came up.
I would like to point out that I'm actually a therapist myself, and sometimes therapists also need a therapist. So I was really stuck, and then one day a friend posted a link for Gina's wealth and money attracting short course, and I went, this sounds great, I'm just gonna book it. And I loved it so much. I really had an epiphany on that course, and it was only meant to be a demonstration, and yet it was really it just opened up possibilities that I was stuck before, and now like, ooh, I can use this to unstuck myself. I'm a great believer that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. and you appeared at the right time. That's all there is to it. So, if anybody is watching this video, it means Gina has appeared in your life. So please give it a try.
She walks where the sky meets the sea, a calm in the chaos, wild and free. The light wraps around